G'day folks, my name is Rob and welcome back for another F1 fantasy video. In today's video, we are going through my team selection for the Miami Grand Prix, the next sprint race on the F1 calendar for 2025. So if you're new around here, as always, please do drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Let's get into everything from Saudi Arabia, the third race of the first triple header of the season, and went into the deadline undecided as to whether I'd do one transfer, make two, activate the limitless. Kind of had a different approach on all three of my teams, and we'll take a look at all of them not long after we review this. But this is my team one, the one I go through every single race week. That had 207 points for the weekend. McLaren kind of doing as they've done all season. Oscar Piastri on a flyer as per usual, and ended up winning his third race of the season. So a great drive for Oscar, once again carrying the team in the driver department. Just about all of the other drivers did their part. Hadjar, Behrman did enough to get the max price rise. I brought in Bortoleto for Jack Doohan, and the Brazilian actually not just outscored Jack Doohan, but didn't drop in price, which was kind of the main factor for my decision to go for him over the Alpine driver. 3 points, honestly, not that bad, all things considered, and still at 4.5 million. So doing exactly what I expect from a driver at his price point. The only real downside from the team this weekend was Pierre Gasly's DNF. He collided with Yuki Tsunoda on the first lap. Pretty much ruined any hope I had of a much bigger green arrow that could have obviously got me closer to the top 100,000. I think most people around my rank just inside the top 200 without Gasly are probably close to about 120, 110. I'm at 161k overall now. And look, heading into the deadline, I definitely been fixated on the Doohan for Bortoleto transfer. Gasly for Ocon was the other one. I was kind of toing and froing after FP3. Obviously, Gasly got P1 in free practice 1 on Friday in Saudi Arabia. The Alpine looks to be driving really well for him. And I did think he certainly had potential for the max price rise if he's contending for P6, P7. And I think Pierre Gasly showed that a lot, certainly in the last part of last year. So I was hoping for big things, unfortunately not to be. And once again, I think the decisions for me each week I've been very happy with. I've gone into the deadline with a pretty strong approach or decision made up. And the one for Gasly in Ocon out didn't pay off because Ocon obviously finished the race and did enough to avoid the 0.6 price drop, which is what Gasly got. Ocon got 0.2 price drop, and obviously I think it was about 8 points or something for him. So definitely rub salt into the wound, and as a result, my idea of whether or not to limitless in Miami is now up in the air. So we're going to get into that in just a little bit. But yeah, probably the sole blemish on the weekend was Pierre Gasly. McLaren, again, did their part. Lando drove really well from P10, getting very close for a podium there. And then Mercedes, a little below where they've been in terms of fantasy production lately. Ferrari certainly made the big jump forward this weekend with Charles Leclerc finishing on the podium, and Ferrari also, again, demonstrating how good they are with pit stops. So speaking of pit stops, Ferrari are once again a sensational asset to own. They've obviously moved past that disqualification in China. Still not over it for those of you asking. And I think are slowly firming as the second constructor to pair with McLaren. Now, I don't think necessarily they are an absolute must buy, and particularly because some people may not have the budget for it. I think Mercedes do provide a strong alternative to that kind of fantasy production. But they are continuing to demonstrate how good they are in the pits. And I do want to get up some statistics, or at least from F1 Fantasy Tools, just to show you how good they are at the moment. We will just filter by pit stop points on f1fantasytools.com. Race fastest pit stop. Go down here. Ferrari have got 10 points for the last 3 races. In fact, I believe they were also on for 10 points in China as well. So these guys are on an absolute tear for pit stops at the moment. If I'm not mistaken, I need to probably filter for that too. So yeah, these guys are on bankers of 15 between Japan and Saudi Arabia. I think that's a huge bonus. If we're looking at Ferrari, surely as just constructors with Leclerc and Hamilton, the car is not that great compared to last year's car, but these 15 points per race week is what's saving them. And I think the fact that McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull are just nowhere near them at the moment in terms of efficiency on the pits is, I think, giving them the edge at the moment, at least. That's my opinion on the matter. And again, their streak in China, had it not been for the disqualification, would have continued through that race as well. So I think I'm very much giving them some thought this weekend, or this upcoming race, I should say, because this video goes out well ahead of Miami. But yeah, just something to think about there. Hamilton, obviously just the one that's probably bringing down the team a little bit in free practice over the weekend. Didn't look overly convincing, had a pretty anonymous race, and there's widespread concern he's just not really that comfortable with the car at the moment. So we'll have to wait and see. But if he gets it together, I think Ferrari are ones to watch. Williams, another team that made a good stride forward in Saudi Arabia. I think they've really turned the corner at the moment compared to where they were at the start of the season. I definitely thought Williams were probably a wait and see, but they're slowly firming up. 27 points in Saudi Arabia, nothing to obviously get too excited about, but I do think it's a step in the right direction, and double points finishes for both drivers is, in my opinion, a great sign for them too. So again, another team to monitor. I'm not sure right now they're going to fit into my team with the structure I've got lined up in the next few weeks, but I think on the other side of Imola, Monaco, Williams certainly could be an option. Now, in terms of what the next few races looks like, Limitless, which we'll just talk about shortly, but there were a number of teams that went for Limitless in Saudi Arabia because they had a team set up for price rises this race weekend just gone. A lot of people have capitalized on those price rises, but drivers like Pierre Gasly, for example, is likely to fall in price just because of that DNF in Saudi Arabia. I'll bring up the budget builder for what it looks like for Miami. You can see Gasly all the way down here. It needs 28 points for max or for a price rise. And I will say that some of these assets, the top 5 or 6 here on the screen between Behrman and Ocon, probably are going to become template yet again if they're not already in the template, Hadjar and Behrman in particular. Ocon did enough in Saudi Arabia, 6 points, solid outing for him. I think double-digit points for most midfield drivers is achievable on a sprint weekend as well. So I do think eyeing off the likes of Alonso, Bortoleto, Lawson, etc. are probably worth your while if you're trying to, again, focus your attention on building budget. If you're activating Limitless in Miami, obviously you can't make transfers because any transfers you make will be reversed if you were to activate the chip. But there will be some drops we may need to eat, like Gasly, for example. I saw a couple people with Albon or Stroll in their teams in Saudi Arabia. So tread with caution, but if you're not activating Limitless in Miami, you may actually be well positioned to pivot off assets that are likely to fall in price once more. Now, on Limitless, we are in the thick of Limitless. We saw a number of people use the chip in Saudi Arabia to great success. Limitless was the play in Saudi Arabia. They had a delta of about 100 points. I'll show you in just a sec what that looked like. But I have got a full strategy guide on how to effectively use Limitless. I published it last week. Definitely check it out if you haven't done so already. It's given everything you need to know about how to use the chip, races to target, assets to use it on, etc. Transfer targets and thoughts. A couple of drivers on the watch list here for this week. Liam Lawson and Fernando Alonso. I was talking about Fernando Alonso a little bit last week. If you've read my Saudi Arabia Grand Prix preview article, Fernando Alonso was in there. Although maybe not the most amazing result for him, 7 points was not a bad outcome, even though he did have another price rise. This time, not the full 0.6, but or the drop, I should say, not the full 0.6 drop, but notwithstanding that, I think he's kind of coming out the other side slowly but surely. Owned it 32%, not a differential, but I think, to be honest, I wouldn't say a lot of people have Fernando Alonso that are watching this video right now. And I will say, not all of his stats paint a pretty picture, but I do think Fernando, with the upcoming sprint race, we obviously just had the budget builder guide on screen just before. He needs only 5 points for a price rise, 11 for the max in Miami. I think that's certainly possible for a driver with his racecraft and experience. And he's building up into good form after a very slow start to the year. 4, 5, and 7. Again, you're not going to get excited about these scores, but I do think a driver like him, even though the car is a bit pedestrian, I wouldn't be forgiven for thinking that looks like an absolute farming tractor, a John Deere. But the Aston Martin obviously not great, but I think Fernando Alonso, very good. So just keep an eye on him at 6.2. You're not breaking the bank to get him in either. Speaking of another driver in the 6 millions, we've got Liam Lawson. And Liam, for me, again, on the fantasy periphery, simply because of the fact he hasn't looked all that great this season for the most part. Didn't look good in the Red Bull. Struggled to find a little bit of form so far in the Racing Bulls. But I think at 11 and 5 over the last 2 races, 8 points per week between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. He's made a few overtakes. He's very aggressive on the track. Yes, I think he is a little bit more of a risk given his inexperience and tends to be aggressive at times. 6% differential though. He is, for me, if he looks comfortable in free practice sprint qualifying, he could be one of those drivers like Alonso that qualifies well down the order in sprint qualifying. And then, as I talked about in my Limitless guide, just claws through overtakes in the sprint race. And as a result of that, matches the production of some of those drivers in the top half of the grid. So a couple of drivers I've certainly got my eye on in Miami, but obviously we have to get there first. In terms of my early team thoughts, very early team thoughts, this is going out over a week before the Miami Grand Prix. But Oscar, for me, easy hold. He's a set and forget. I said it in the first race of the season. I'll be saying it in Abu Dhabi. I don't think he's going anywhere. The guy is leading the world championship right now. He's as good as you can hope for from a driver in your team in Formula One, let alone in your F1 fantasy team. So I would definitely prioritize getting him in if you don't own him already. Other drivers on hold for me: Hadjar, Behrman, Bortoleto. I've talked about all 3 of these guys in previous videos. They're set and forgets at the moment because of these price rises that they're just seeming to accumulate every single race week. Bortoleto obviously not accruing any price rises, but he's also not getting any price falls either from just being at the price floor of 4.5 million. So I think for me, Bortoleto is a fixture for at least the next few weeks while I figure out when I'm running Limitless, because I know he won't drop in value. Gasly is the main risk in my team for this week in Miami. I'm very likely either going to run Limitless in Miami, Imola, or Monaco. Perhaps not Miami, simply because Gasly is likely to drop 0.6 and you want as many drivers looking to rise in price when you activate Limitless, simply because you get the price changes of your non-Limitless team when you activate the chips. So lots to think about for Pierre, and then McLaren not going anywhere. I've got Mercedes at risk, and that's because Ferrari, as I've said, are back on the menu at the moment. So I will bring my team up one more time for the first time. And that's pretty much how it's set up. As I pointed out before, I actually did promise at the start of the video, I would show you my ranks for the other teams. They're all pretty much the same in terms of team setup. We've got Mercedes, Ocon, Behrman, Piastri. It's just the team 1, which is the one I'm showing on screen here, has had the Ferrari disqualification, the Gasly DNF. So not a pretty picture. These 2 guys are probably going to, as per usual, for the last 3 seasons, finish ahead of my team 1. But these changes, these updates to team 1 for this week will probably be mirrored in some respect to teams 2 and 3. So as I said, Gasly, probably the driver most at risk. And this is assuming I don't activate Limitless in Miami. Again, you've got to watch my team strategy or chip strategy video from last week on Limitless to understand why I may not run it in this upcoming sprint weekend. But for me, if I do target Ferrari, and that's just, as I said, talking about the pit stops, if Hamilton returns the form, Leclerc's doing his part at least, but we need to see more from the 7-time world champion. That leaves me 7.7 in the kitty. Now, the Gasly drop, very unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. Certainly if I decide not to go down the Mercedes path, so get in Ferrari, that leaves me with just about anyone from Lawson down to Doohan. And I've talked about these 2 guys. For argument's sake, let's put in Fernando. I think I could very much see myself running this team in Miami. And assuming that's the case, then I would naturally carry it through Imola if I activated Limitless. Then, on the contrary, the sole reason why I could end up rolling one transfer is if I become very fixated on using Limitless in Monaco. I'd be very surprised if that happened, because that's the race after Imola. But if I did do that, I could get signs in. He is expected to go down in price though in Miami, so probably not. So I may just honestly make one move. As stupid as this sounds, bringing back in Esteban Ocon. It's again because of the fact if we go over to the budget builder, he only needs to score 12 for the max rise in Miami. I think that's very much possible for a Haas car that is dreadful at qualifying, but pretty decent over a race distance. I'd back the Haas more than I back the Aston Martin, to be honest, just because I expect Ocon to qualify much further down the grid than Fernando Alonso. So that's, the other such route. I think, honestly, if I don't go down that path, then it's probably limitless. If we see a bunch of drivers in the top half of the grid qualify out of position, Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, for instance, then I'll go down the limitless route and just have to eat the price drop of Pierre Gasly, as I talked about before. So that's kind of the makings of what my team setup will be for Miami if I choose to not go down the sprint race, the limitless path for the sprint race. These are the two slots. Really don't see myself moving anyone else out in the team, and may well just carry through the bones of this to beyond limitless whenever that weekend may be, and then pull a wild card on the other side if I need to clear out some of this deadwood. So that's it, guys. I'm going to have a few days off between videos as we've got a 1 week break between Saudi Arabia and Miami. So I'll be back with my final thoughts closer to the deadline. But as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.